The truth behind the sinking of the Titanic. While some people believe it was an accident, there has been many conspiracy theories over if the ship was sunken on purpose. Was J.P. Morgan behind it all, or was it just a coincidence to find the truth? Behind this we have to go back to May 31st, 1911, May 31st, 1911. On May 31st, 1911, the RMS Titanic was launched into the River Loddon in Belfast, Ireland. The launch, witnessed by over 100,000 people, marked a significant milestone in the ship's construction, with the hull then towed to a fitting-out dock for further work. Meanwhile, the Olympic Titanic's sister ship had already had its maiden voyage in June 1911. The day the Titanic set sail was April 10, 1912. It was a momentous occasion, marked by excitement and anticipation, to really find out if J.P. Morgan was behind the sinking of the Titanic. Let's talk about what J.P. Morgan did the day of the ship's sinking. On April 15, 1912, the RMS Titanic sank after hitting an iceberg during its maiden voyage from Southampton to New York City. J.P. Morgan, the influential banker and financier, was actually connected to the Titanic through his ownership of the International Mercantile Marine Company, which controlled the White Star Line, the operator of the Titanic. However, on the day the Titanic sank, J.P. Morgan was not present. He had canceled his trip on the Titanic shortly before its departure. On the day the Titanic sank, April 15, 1912, J.P. Morgan was in New York City as he was preparing for the launch of his new ship, the RMS Olympic, which was set to begin its maiden voyage just a week later. Despite being the owner of the White Star Line, which operated the Titanic, Morgan was not aboard the Titanic during its fateful journey. In fact, he had canceled his plans to be on the ship at the last minute for reasons that are often debated among historians. J.P. Morgan ultimately decided not to board the Titanic due to a combination of personal and business reasons. J.P. Morgan is often speculated to have had ulterior motives surrounding the sinking of the Titanic. Before its maiden voyage, there were reports of a coal fire in the Titanic's bunker. A few days before the ship set sail, a fire broke out in one of the coal bunkers, which was not put out completely before the voyage. April 14, 1912. The Titanic received multiple ice warnings from other ships in the area. The impact caused a series of gashes along her starboard side, opening 5 of her 16 watertight compartments to the sea. The ship's distress signals were sent out, including the famous SOS. The crew began evacuation procedures, but the lifeboats were insufficient for all passengers, with only 20 lifeboats available, capable of accommodating about half of the 2,224 people aboard. As water flooded the compartments, the Titanic began listing, and chaos ensued. Many passengers were reluctant to leave the ship, believing it to be unsinkable. Women and children were prioritized for lifeboat spaces, leading to a tragic outcome for many men who remained on board. The Titanic broke apart and sank into the frigid waters of the Atlantic Ocean. It is estimated that around 1,500 people perished in the disaster, with only about 710 survivors rescued by the nearby ship, RMS Carpathia. The Titanic disaster led to widespread shock and condemnation. A lack of sufficient lifeboats and improperly executed evacuation procedures. The need for improved regulations regarding ice patrols and maritime safety. Changes to the International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea SOLAS, established in 1914 as a direct response to the Titanic disaster, strengthening safety protocols and requirements for passenger ships. The story of the Titanic has inspired numerous books, films, and documentaries, solidifying its place in popular culture. The ship's legacy continues to evoke strong emotions and serves as a poignant reminder of human ambition and the consequences of negligence. The wreck of the Titanic was discovered in 1985 by a Franco-American expedition, and since then, various dives and explorations have taken place, revealing more about the ship's condition and the stories of those aboard. After the disaster, Morgan played a significant role in the financial recovery of the shipping industry and was involved in discussions about maritime safety reforms that emerged in the aftermath of the tragedy. The sinking of the Titanic is widely recognized as a tragic accident, resulting from a collision with an iceberg, rather than a deliberate act. Conspiracy theories suggesting that the Titanic was sunk on purpose have circulated over the years, often citing factors like insurance claims or corporate rivalries. The Titanic was known for carrying many wealthy and influential passengers on its maiden voyage. Some of the notable rich individuals aboard included John Jacob Astor Ivor, a prominent American business magnate, real estate developer, investor, writer, and lieutenant in the Spanish-American War. He was one of the richest men in the world at the time. Why was John Jacob Astor on the Titanic? John Jacob Astor Ivor was on the Titanic because he and his pregnant wife, Madeline Force Astor, were returning to New York from a honeymoon in Europe, after the scandalous remarriage caused a stir, says Business Insider. They had planned an extended honeymoon to avoid public scrutiny, and were returning to the U.S. for Madeline's pregnancy and the birth of their child, Isidore Straus, co-owner of Macy's department store and a former U.S. congressman. He was traveling with his wife Ida, who famously refused to leave his side, and they both perished in the disaster. Why was Isidore Straus on the Titanic? Isidore Straus was on the Titanic because he and his wife Ida were returning to New York after spending the winter in Europe, primarily in the south of France. They were booked on the Titanic, which was considered the most luxurious ocean liner at the time, as a way to travel back to the United States. Benjamin Guggenheim, an American businessman and member of the wealthy Guggenheim family. He was traveling with his mistress, Madame Hobart, and both were lost in the sinking. Why was Benjamin Guggenheim on the Titanic? Benjamin Guggenheim was on the Titanic because he was returning to New York after a trip to Europe, and he boarded the ship in France. He was accompanied by his mistress, Leontine Hobart, her maid, his valet, and his chauffeur, Thomas Andrews, the ship's designer and managing director of Harland and Wolff. He was on board to observe the maiden voyage and was active in helping others during the sinking. Why was Thomas Andrews on the Titanic? Thomas Andrews, the chief designer and managing director of Harland and Wolff, was on the Titanic's maiden voyage to oversee the ship's performance and make notes for potential improvements. He was tasked with ensuring everything ran smoothly and to gather feedback for future designs. The ship's captain, who had a long career with White Star Line and was revered in the maritime community, although he also went down with the ship. Why was Edward J. Smith on the Titanic? Edward J. Smith was the captain of the RMS Titanic on its maiden voyage because he was a highly experienced captain and a senior officer with the White Star Line, known for his ability to command the company's largest and most luxurious ships. He had previously commanded the Olympic, the Titanic's sister ship, and was known for his popularity with wealthy passengers, earning him the nickname Millionaire's Captain. Known as the unsinkable Molly Brown. Although she is often remembered for her bravery during the sinking, she was also the wife of a wealthy copper magnate, J.J. Brown. Why was Margaret Molly Brown on the Titanic? Margaret Molly Brown was on the Titanic because she had received news of her ill grandson and was rushing back to the United States to be with him. She was traveling in Europe when she learned of his illness, so she booked passage on the Titanic, the largest and most extravagant ship at the time, to return home. George Dutton Widener, a wealthy Philadelphia businessman and philanthropist. He was traveling with his wife Eleanor and their son Harry. They did not survive. Why was George Dutton Widener on the Titanic? And George Dutton Widener was on the Titanic because he and his family were returning from a business trip in Europe, specifically Paris, to New York City. He was traveling with his wife Eleanor and their son Harry, along with their servants. The family had booked first-class passage on the Titanic. George was the president of several railways and streetcar companies, and the family was also searching for a new chef for Widener's new hotel, the Ritz-Carlton, in Philadelphia. Henry B. Harris, a prominent theater manager in New York, he was traveling with his wife and was lost in the disaster. These individuals were part of the first-class passengers, who mostly occupied the upper decks of the Titanic. The tragedy affected many lives and left a lasting impact on those who survived and the families of those who perished. There was a considerable desire to showcase its speed and efficiency, as it was touted as one of the most advanced and luxurious ships of its time. The captain, Edward Smith, was known for wanting to make a record-breaking crossing of the Atlantic, which also fueled the decision to maintain higher speeds. Additionally, there was significant competition among transatlantic liners, and faster voyages could lead to more publicity and possibly increased business. However, this high speed was reckless given the ice warnings received during the voyage. Despite these warnings, the Titanic continued at a pace that ultimately contributed to the disastrous collision with the iceberg. The presence of wealthy individuals on the Titanic can be attributed to several factors. First, the Titanic was marketed as a luxurious and sophisticated mode of travel, making it particularly appealing to the upper class. It was considered a symbol of prestige, so many affluent passengers chose it for its opulence and amenities. Additionally, during the early 20th century, transatlantic travel was a popular choice among the rich for business and leisure. Many wealthy people were traveling between Europe and America for various reasons, including business dealings, family visits, or vacations. The Titanic offered a quick and comfortable journey, making it an attractive option for those who could afford it. Lastly, the Titanic's inaugural voyage was heavily publicized, creating a buzz that drew in high-profile guests eager to experience this new ship. This combination of luxury, status, and convenience made the Titanic a favored choice for the wealthy elite of the time. But the real question is, was J.P. Morgan the reason why the ship sank? Here are 10 reasons why J.P. couldn't have been behind the sinking. J.P. Morgan was primarily a financier and had no direct role in the day-to-day management or operational decisions of the Titanic. The ship's operations were overseen by the Star Line, which made decisions independently of Morgan. Limited authority over ship design. While Morgan financed the White Star Line, he did not have input into the ship's design process. The construction and engineering decisions were made by experts at Harland and Wolff, showing a clear divide between financial backing and practical execution. At the time, it was common for ships to travel at high speeds despite potential iceberg hazards. This prevailing industry practice indicates a broader cultural attitude towards safety that cannot be solely attributed to Morgan. The Titanic's lifeboat capacity was compliant with the regulations of the time, which were based on ship tonnage rather than actual passenger safety needs. Morgan had no say in determining these outdated standards. The process of relaying iceberg warnings was flawed, and the Titanic crew made poor decisions based on that information. Morgan's involvement did not extend to influencing how warnings were communicated or acted upon. The intense competition among shipping lines led to a race to attract passengers, sometimes at the expense of safety. Morgan's financial involvement does not explain the collective pressures that influence such risky choices in the industry. The operational failures that contributed to the sinking were tied to specific individuals, such as the captain and crew, whose decisions shaped the situation on that fateful night, none of which were influenced by Morgan. The executives at White Star Line had the autonomy to make decisions regarding the Titanic and did not rely on Morgan's direction, further establishing that he was not responsible for operational choices. J.P. Morgan was involved in many business ventures and had a wide array of interests beyond shipping. His focus on various investments and industries meant he could not personally dictate the practices of the White Star Line. Morgan's decision to cancel his voyage was a personal choice unrelated to the ship's fate. Ironically, it underscores the randomness of life and the many factors beyond one person's control. Here's 4 reasons why the ship could have been sank on purpose. As a financier, J.P. Morgan had a vested interest in ensuring that the Titanic met the expectations of luxury and speed to attract more passengers. If he had pressured the White Star Line executives to prioritize speed over safety measures, this could have contributed to the risky navigation choices made during the voyage. Reason number 2. If Morgan had limited funding or resources for the Titanic's safety features, such as adequate lifeboats or improved hull design, the ship may have been inadequately equipped for such a transatlantic journey, increasing the risk in the event of an emergency. Reason number 3. Although Morgan did not directly manage the Titanic, his status and influence could have led executives at the White Star Line to prioritize profit and passenger numbers over safety. If he had been a strong advocate for more aggressive marketing strategies without regard for safety protocols, this could have shaped the company's operational culture. Reason number 4. If Morgan had advocated for a culture of expediency that discouraged thorough communication regarding iceberg warnings, this could have invalidated appropriate response actions by the crew. While not directly responsible, his influence could have contributed to a problematic operational environment. Was it on purpose or not? Even though there is no real answer to whether it was done on purpose or not, I had to choose based on the info I just read. I would say it was done on purpose.